Hi, this is Roman, and today I'm going to discuss strategies to introduce conditional probability. We're going over Unit 8, Day 2 on Up to Chance Part 2, and our focus question here is going to be how can we use a model or data to determine probability. So I'm going to be focusing on slide 9 in this lesson, where we have the introduction of a chance experiment, an event, an outcome, probability, and sample space. So I've created my document in Desmos and I'll be sharing that link. So I'm going to the Desmos activity I have. And again, I'm focusing on that slide as our introduction and launch, where we introduce the chance experiment, the event, the outcome, the probability, and the sample space. So I would modify this and actually have students think about flipping a coin as we're introducing all these terms, right? So ask them what the probability of flipping heads is. And my tips here would be to discuss what a sample space would be of flipping a coin. Then really hone in on the idea of the flip being the experiment and the result being random, and heads and tails representing the total number of outcomes, which are equally likely. And one thing that I would really like to add here is the discussion of how the sum of probabilities are going to end up equaling 1. Because I feel like that's something that reoccurs in probability, and it's a nice way to introduce the topic and set that foundation for students as the questions become more rigorous. I also find that it's great for students in terms of SAT prep, because these questions present themselves on SATs. And I could also mention for students who are interested in graduate degrees, they present themselves on GMAT and GRE questions as well. So if I take a look at my preview, I have the sketch feature here. So I would highly recommend the sketch feature as you give students these introductions in probability, right? Heads and tails is something they could visualize, but as we keep going, they might want to mark up these chances or chance experiments that they possibly have never heard of. So they might not be familiar with a deck of cards, they might not be familiar with a die. So it's great to have a graphic there, and it's great to have them be able to mark it up. So from here, I would go over general facts that I'd like each student to know after having that long discussion on flipping a coin and coming to the conclusions from that slide 9, and having them really move from a concrete to an abstract understanding by setting that foundation of flipping a coin. So other facts that I think should be mentioned in the beginning of probability: if an event is certain to occur, then the probability of that event occurring is equal to 1. If it's certain not to occur, then the probability of that event will be 0. Again, reinforcing that if an event is possible but not certain to occur, it's between 0 and 1, right? And I think that really goes hand in hand with this fourth fact, that the sum of probabilities of all outcomes of an experiment is 1. I'm going to fix that right there. So if I go back here and we have students say that the probability of heads is 1/2 and the probability of tails is 1/2, we really want to show them that the sum of those two are equal to 1, representing that full experiment. So a few more resources that I would like to share at this point. A sample of rolling 2 dice, right? So this is a graphic I created. And again, I give students the opportunity to use the sketch feature in Desmos. I think it's very valuable, right? Especially, let's say we're talking about the probability of rolling a sum of 12, right? They could look through all these options and really circle which one we're talking about. And using a graphic really pushes that progression from concrete to abstract in terms of understanding, setting that foundation for them. Because as we keep going, they're not going to have these images, but it's a great starting point. So with this sample of rolling 2 dice, I added a sample question and its sample solution as a way that you might want to include this graphic. And that'd be up to you. One more sample that I included is a standard deck of cards. right? And as a few samples, right, a lot of probability questions might ask, what's the probability of choosing a heart out of the full deck, right? And you could have students circle all the hearts here and then count them up, right? I also like the idea when we have two cases like, and this is going a little bit further, but the probability of a heart or a king, right? And now if you have this graphic that I've created, students get to see that overlap and really see that subtraction that might be coming because we're counting two events twice. For, in this sample, a king of hearts. And again, just like that previous example, I added a sample question, right? And again, I'm using that sketch feature. And in my case, I use the table in Desmos, but you could use anything that you prefer. And in my last sample, something that I would use in the introduction piece is a sum of probability question. So I'm going to read this question and then talk about why I feel it's valuable on that first day. Suppose there is a six-sided die that is weighted in such a way that each time the die is rolled, the probabilities of rolling any of the numbers from 1 to 5 are all equal, but the probability of rolling a 6 is twice the probability of rolling a 1. What's the probability of rolling a 6? So one teacher move that I love doing here is showing students that these are real items and they're available for sale. Just with a Google search, we can find that right away. And then also reminding them that it's a bad idea to gamble with these because it will catch up to you. So that's not what you're pushing, but you're pushing that they do exist, right? It's not a fabrication of our imagination. And I would include this on the first day because you get to reinforce the idea of the sum of probabilities. And on the next slide, I've prepared an answer key that you could use as a model exemplar here, right? So you're reinforcing the idea here that the sum of probabilities is 1. And in my case here, in my sample exemplar, I let the probability of 1 to 5 each be x. And then if the probability of 6 is twice as much as the probability of 1, I let that be 2x. And as I solve for x, I got 1/7. And if I substitute for the probability of 6, that would be 2/7. And then I would highly recommend making sure each student substitute in that 1/7 into the sum of probabilities to see that you would get 7/7 or 1 as the sum. So these are activities that I feel would be useful for that first day. And as I click publish here, I do want to remind you guys that you could, once you click this link, just click these 3 dots, click copy and edit, and you'll make it your own. And it's labeled the lesson that is posted on TeachUp.